So the other major type of bond that we will work with in class is a covalent bond. And they are different from ionic bonds in the fact that they share electrons instead of one ion stealing an electron from another. So covalent bonds form so that each atom, through sharing, fulfills its octet, okay, and gets to the most stable level of electrons. Covalent compounds involve nonmetals only, all right, which is why you can combine things like carbon dioxide, both of those could form negative ions, or carbon tetrachloride, or H2O. Right? These are all things that make covalent bonds through sharing their electrons instead of one taking the electrons from the other. So if you're naming these, it's a little easier to start with naming with covalent bonds than it is to inherently understand how they bond, because the name gives you a hint as far as how many you need. All right, so like ionic bonding, there's always two-word names. The leftmost element, meaning like the leftmost on the periodic table, or you could think of the element with the smaller atomic number. That's another way of thinking about it, because say you happen to have two things in the same group bond together, so it's smaller atomic number. For the second element, we substitute an "-ine", just like in ionic bonding, but you also have to put a prefix to indicate how many, because there are more than one way to combine, say, carbon and oxygen. Okay? It depends on the type of bonds that you use. So, an example of that is fluorine and hydrogen. Typically, it's made with one of each. Hydrogen, you find leftmost on the periodic table, so that comes first, so hydrogen. Fluorine, there's just one, so we say monofluoride. Okay. So the big kind of new thing to covalent bonding is if there's more than one atom of an element, we have to use prefixes. Prefixes that are used standardly in chemistry, we use mono to represent one, and you only have to write in mono for the second element. If there's only one of the first element, like with hydrogen monofluoride, which would just be HF, we didn't need to say monohydrogen, okay? All of the other prefixes, di for 2, tri for 3, penta for 5, you have to put those in the first element or the second element, right? Whatever has 5 has to have penta in front of it. Right? Whatever has 7 has to have hepta in front of it. So let's go through a couple examples. So see if you can name these on your own beforehand. All right, and then I'll go through and write the answers in. So we have 2 phosphorus and 5 oxygen. Both of those are bigger than 1, so we have to include a prefix. So it's going to be diphosphorus pentaoxide. Okay. Now all of these formulas are already set up so that the leftmost element is written first. You write the formulas that way too, but in case you ever have a question where like, okay, I want you to combine 2 oxygens and 1 carbon, you have to remember that carbon's got to be written before the oxygen. Okay. But this would be, we have 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. Since carbon's written first, I don't need mono. So I just say carbon dioxide. Okay, and then we have 2 hydrogens and 1 sulfur. So 2, we have to write in the prefix, and then since it's 1 sulfur, and that's the second element, we have to write the mono in for that. So this is dihydrogen monosulfide. Okay, and you don't need to capitalize the first word. I'm just doing that for consistency. So now we have 1 carbon and 3 chlorines. Okay, or sorry, 4 chlorines. Carbon comes first. Since it's first and there's only 1, we don't need the mono, so I can just write out carbon. And then I'm going to finish it with chloride, but 4 is represented by tetra. So it's carbon tetrachloride. Then this one we have 2 waters and 1 oxygen. So this would be dihydrogen. Oops, I'm making a mistake, and hopefully you were catching me on that. Since it's 1 oxygen and it's the second element, we have to write monoxide. Okay, and that would be the actual technical name for water, would be dihydrogen monoxide. Sometimes you will run into things that have common names, all right? The naming with the prefixes and everything, that is the standard, no matter what language you're speaking, that's how we name it. Whereas common names, those can change based on the language, all right? So H2O, or dihydrogen monoxide, we call water. Ammonia, or nitrogen. This one technically should be H3N if you follow the rules, so it would be trihydrogen nitride. Okay, CH4 has the name of methane, and H2 we usually just refer to hydrogen gas instead of dihydrogen. Okay, so some things will have common names, and you're fine using them. So this was for review and or absences. Make sure you also watch the video on Lewis structures.